There's a kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it seeps into your bones. That's what I felt when my son Michael looked across the living room and said, "Mom, we weren't expecting you for Christmas this year. Not we don't have space. Not let's find another time. Just, you're not expected." It took me a moment to process the words. The cinnamon rolls I'd baked from scratch, still warm in the tin I brought over, suddenly smelled less sweet. The candlelight flickered across the marble countertops I'd helped pay for. The garland on their 12-foot Christmas tree seemed to shimmer in mockery. I had come with my heart full, offering, not asking. I even wore the red sweater Michael gave me 5 Christmases ago, hoping he'd notice. He didn't. He sat beside his wife, Isabella, who offered me a tight smile from behind her wine glass. "My parents will be flying in from Santa Barbara," she said smoothly. "We want to make it feel cohesive." Cohesive. I know what that word means in her language. It means I don't match the tableware. I don't match the mood boards or the Instagram feed. It means you don't fit. And worse, Michael didn't even challenge it. I looked around the living room. The velvet curtains I paid for when Isabella wanted something more elegant. The refinished hardwood I covered when they were short on their mortgage. The KitchenAid mixer on the counter, $700 of my retirement money, because Isabella wanted to start baking more. And now I wasn't even welcome for Christmas. "Where would you like me to go?" then I asked softly. Michael flinched, then glanced at Isabella before responding. "Maybe you could spend it with Aunt Rosa, or we could plan something for the weekend after." The weekend after? Like I was some overflow guest. A footnote. I stood slowly. My knees ached from the years, and my heart felt heavier than it had in a long time. Michael opened his mouth maybe to apologize, but I was already walking toward the door. I passed the family photos on the wall. Each year, my face moved farther to the edge. And some, I wasn't even in them at all. At the front door, I turned just slightly and said, "Tell your in-laws." I said, "Merry Christmas." Then I stepped into the cold. I didn't go home right away. I drove through our old neighborhood, the one with the corner bakery, where I used to buy snowman cookies for Michael when he was 5. The park where I taught him to ride a bike. The church where we used to sing carols side by side. Places that remembered me, even if he didn't. When I got home, the porch light flickered like always. Still broken, still mine. Inside it was quiet, not peaceful, empty. I set down the cinnamon rolls on the counter untouched. The phone buzzed in my purse. Michael. I let it ring. Because sometimes silence is the loudest way a mother can say enough. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, the cinnamon rolls still untouched in the kitchen. The house creaked the way it always did in winter. The old radiator hissed. The porch light flickered again, refusing to die, but too tired to shine. Everything around me was worn, but it was mine. Mine in a way that the marble kitchen, the velvet drapes, and the 12-foot tree at Michael's house had never been. I used to think that love meant giving, quietly, steadily, without asking for thanks. But maybe I had mistaken sacrifice for love. And maybe I had given so much that there was nothing left of me to be seen. I opened the bottom drawer of my old wooden desk, the one Maria, my late husband, built when we first married. Inside were decades of receipts, folders, old documents kept not out of paranoia, but habit. I began laying them out. The check for $47,000 I wrote from my home equity line so Michael could afford his down payment. The invoice for the roof repair I paid when a storm damaged their home. The kitchen remodeling bill where Isabella insisted granite was essential. 3 years of utilities. $600 here, $200 there. A $5,000 landscaping fee for the backyard party Isabella threw for her parents' anniversary. Even the new nursery paint I bought back when I thought I'd be welcome in my grandchild's life. I hadn't just invested in their home. I had invested in the illusion that one day I'd be part of that life. The next morning, I made a cup of tea, not the cheap brand I usually drank, but the nice chamomile I'd been saving for guests that never came. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to taste my own effort. It was quiet, peaceful, and for once I wasn't calculating how much of my pension would go to cover their next utility bill. That silence felt earned. At 10:43 a.m., my phone rang. Isabella's name on the screen. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Hi, Lorraine," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "I think there was a little misunderstanding yesterday." "Michael didn't mean to upset you." I said nothing. "It's just, my parents are used to a certain kind of atmosphere, and you know how things can get awkward." "Awkward? You mean when the woman who paid for your chandelier sits at the same table as your mother, who thinks I'm beneath her?" There was silence. "That's not fair," Isabella said, tone sharpening. "You've helped us, yes, but that doesn't mean you get to dictate how we celebrate." "I don't want to dictate anything," I replied. "I just wanted to be part of the family I helped build." Michael and I talked, and we agreed it might be best for all of us if we set some boundaries going forward. "We appreciate your help, but we also need space to grow independently." I smiled, not kindly. "Isabella," I said softly, "you'll have all the space you need." Then I hung up. That night, I lit a single candle in the living room. Not for decoration, not for guests, just for me. And as the warm light flickered against the walls, I whispered something I hadn't said out loud in years. No more. I didn't sleep much that night. Not out of anger, not even sadness. It was something deeper. A hollow realization that I had spent years financing a version of love that didn't love me back. By sunrise, I had made up my mind. I poured myself a cup of coffee and walked over to the same window where I used to wait for Michael to come home after curfew. Snowflakes drifted quietly through the air. Christmas was 2 weeks away. They didn't expect me for the holidays. Then they wouldn't expect what came next either. At 9:01 a.m., I called the bank. "Hi, this is Lorraine Carter. I need to speak with someone about canceling an automatic mortgage payment." The woman on the other end confirmed my identity, then asked, "Are you sure you want to stop this transfer?" "It's scheduled for the 15th. I looked out the window again. "Yes," I said, clear and calm. "Effective immediately." A pause. "Noted," she replied. "The payment has been canceled. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" I smiled more to myself than anyone else. "No," I said. "That's everything." And for the first time in years, I truly meant it. I sat back at the kitchen table and stared at the small note where I'd scribbled all the contributions I'd made over the past 5 years. $47,000 for the down payment, $18,000 for the kitchen remodel, $5,000 for landscaping, $2,800 every month for mortgage payments, 5 years, over $200, $1,000. And what had I bought with that money? A seat outside the family Christmas. A role as an invisible investor in someone else's happily ever after. A reputation, if you could call it that, as the woman who's always so generous yet never invited to dinner. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Michael. I almost ignored it, but something in me needed closure. I answered. "Mom," he began cautiously. "Isabella told me you seemed upset yesterday." I just wanted to explain. "Don't," I said. "Just let me say no." I repeated, steady as stone. "You had your chance." There was a long silence. Then he asked, "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the mortgage payment won't be going through this month. Or any month after this." He exhaled hard. "Mom, come on, don't do this." I took a breath. "For 5 years, I have helped you and Isabella build your dream. I said yes every time you needed help, even when it cost me my future." "Mom, we're family," I cut him off. "Family doesn't mean being used. It doesn't mean silence in exchange for loyalty." "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, and for once, He almost sounded sincere. But sincerity doesn't repaint a door that's been slammed in your face. That night, I lit the fire in the fireplace for the first time in ages. It crackled to life, warm and alive. I curled up with a book, a blanket, and my thoughts. Outside, snow fell gently. Inside, peace began to grow where resentment used to live. 3 days passed quietly. Too quietly. I should have known better. Isabella had never handled rejection with grace. And Michael, despite being my son, had never been good at standing between me and the storm. So when my neighbor Janice handed me a folded copy of the local newspaper on her morning walk, her expression tight, I felt something drop in my stomach. "Lorraine," she said gently, "I think you should see this. On page 3, under the lifestyle column, was my name. Well, not just my name, my face. The headline read, 'Spokane Woman Allegedly Abandons Elderly Couple at Airport in Holiday Storm.' I froze. It was a photo of me from 2 years ago, taken at a local volunteer luncheon, smiling, hands folded politely. A snapshot stolen from my good years. The article painted a different version of reality, one where I had callously stranded Isabella's parents at the airport during one of the worst travel days of the season. It described me as unstable, vindictive, and mentally unwell. A woman estranged from her family who had refused to assist aging travelers out of spite. Not one mention of the years I'd paid their bills. Not one sentence about the Christmas invitation that never came. Just a brutal character assassination, dressed in polite prose. I sat at the kitchen table and reread the article twice, then a third time. Each word chipped away at something inside me. Not just my pride, my identity. I had taught elementary school for 32 years, volunteered at food drives, donated to every fundraiser Michael ever asked me to support. And now I was being painted as a villain in my own town. All because I said one word, no. But here's the thing about a woman who has spent her whole life giving. When she finally stands up, she doesn't tremble. She calculates. That afternoon, I opened the dusty filing cabinet in my back room and pulled out every record I'd ever kept. Receipts, transfers, handwritten notes from bank managers, emails from Michael thanking me for the lifesaver loan. I gathered them one by one, laying them across my dining room table like puzzle pieces. And I started building something stronger than revenge, a timeline. December 18th, 1 week before Christmas. They wanted a war fine. I'd give them a case study in what it looks like when a quiet woman gets fed up. Christmas Eve arrived cold and sharp, the kind of winter day that makes you feel both alive and alone at the same time. I dressed deliberately, not in mourning, but in armor. A dark navy coat Maria used to love on me. Simple pearl earrings, clean shoes polished the night before. No red, no glitter. I wasn't here to celebrate. I was here for clarity. At 6:20 p.m., I parked across the street from Michael and Isabella's house. Lights glowed from every window. Laughter floated out faintly, the clinking of glasses and the rhythm of easy comfort. Their driveway was full. Cars lined both sides of the block. This was their big night, hosting Isabella's parents, wealthy friends, local business partners, and all of them were about to learn who had paid for the party. I crossed the street slowly, careful not to slip on the ice. The briefcase in my hand wasn't heavy, but it carried 5 years of silence. I rang the bell. A moment passed, then another, and then the door opened. Isabella answered. Her smile froze mid-expression when she saw me. "Lorraine," she said, recovering. "We weren't expecting." "I know," I said, "but I think you'll want to hear what I brought." Michael appeared behind her lips, parting slightly. His eyes dropped to the briefcase. "Mom, I'm not here to cause a scene," I said, walking past them into the foyer. "I'm here to clarify one." The dining room was stunning. Candlelight, garland, silver flatware. A feast laid out like a magazine spread. 10 guests turned to look at me, confusion and mild curiosity flickering behind polite expressions. "Good evening," I said, placing the briefcase at the head of the table. "Before you continue with dessert, I'd like to introduce myself properly. Lorraine Isabella." Hissed, this is not the time I ignored her. "My name is Lorraine Carter. I'm Michael's mother. Many of you have probably heard about the incident at the airport." Soft murmurs passed down the table. Let me give you the version that wasn't printed. I opened the briefcase. Inside printed receipts, a tabbed binder copies of mortgage records emails. I handed a stack to the nearest guest, a man in a gray suit with a glass of wine mid-air. 5 years ago, I used my retirement savings to help Michael and Isabella purchase this home. I began voice steady. I paid the down payment. I financed the kitchen. I covered their bills during 3 separate periods of unemployment. Each line was a needle, and every face around the table flinched in its own way. $800 a month. Every month. For 5 years. I placed a second stack of papers in front of Isabella's father. Last week, I was told I wouldn't be welcome here for Christmas because I didn't fit the image Isabella wanted to present to you. A woman in pearls leaned forward slightly. "That can't be true," she whispered. Michael looked down at his lap. Isabella's face was rigid. And when I said no, when I finally stopped paying, I was rewarded with a slanderous article in the newspaper, painting me as a cruel, bitter woman who abandoned 2 innocent people. I pulled out a copy of the article and set it in the center of the table. Now I said, "You tell me who abandoned who." The room was silent. Even the fireplace seemed to stop crackling. Isabella's father stood slowly, paper in hand. "You mean to say," he said carefully, "that you've been funding this entire household?" I nodded, quietly, without asking for recognition. Until now. A guest near the end of the table muttered, "Unbelievable." Another one simply said, "Shameful." Isabella shot to her feet. "You're manipulating them." I met her eyes without blinking. "No, I'm finally telling the truth." I turned to Michael. "You had a choice. You could have told the truth. You could have protected me. You chose silence." "I didn't know it would go this far," he whispered. "But you let it?" I replied. Then I took one last look at the table, the guest, the glittering chandelier that once came from my credit card, and I said, "Dinner's on me, but the cost, that's all yours." And I walked out the door. The morning after Christmas, I woke to something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness and satisfaction. There were no emails from Michael, no passive-aggressive texts from Isabella, no emergency calls begging for help. Just snow outside my window and the warmth of a choice finally made. I made coffee strong black and opened the local paper out of habit. And that's when I saw it. Page 5. Lifestyle and Community section. A Mother's Quiet Power. The real story behind the airport scandal. My breath caught. There it was, my words, my receipts, my voice. A full-page spread written by the same reporter who had published the original slander. Only this time, it told the truth. And the truth was devastating. The article laid out the facts, my financial records, my timeline of payments, my statement of events. It quoted witnesses from the Christmas dinner, included scanned receipts, even mentioned the original article's lack of fact-checking. There was a photo of me, not the outdated volunteer one, but one from that night. Standing tall in my navy coat, speaking with a hand gently on the back of a dining chair. The caption read, "Lorraine Carter, more than just a mother, a builder, a protector, a truth teller." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just closed the paper, folded it neatly, and placed it beside my coffee cup. At 11:32 a.m., my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Mom Michael's voice came through thin and exhausted. Can I come over? There was silence on my end for a long time. Then I said, You may. When he arrived, he looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Dark circles, unshaven. His once polished blazer wrinkled and stained. He stood in my doorway like a boy who didn't know if he was welcome. I read the article he began. So did everyone else. I replied, stepping aside. He entered quietly, sat down on the same chair where Maria used to read bedtime stories to him. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, They're calling it a scandal. Dad from the HOA said it's all anyone's talking about. That's what happens, I said gently, when lies rot from the inside out. Michael looked at his hands. Isabella's parents are furious. Her mom told her they won't speak to us until the house is sold. I think we're going to lose everything. I nodded. That happens too. He looked up startled. You're not angry, oh Michael. I sighed. I was angry 5 years ago. What I feel now is different. It's clarity. He leaned forward. Mom, I need to ask, is there any way you could resume the payments just until we figure out what's next? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just said no. He flinched. But this is our home. No, I corrected. It was a gift, and a gift isn't a promise. It's a choice, and I'm choosing to stop. He said nothing, just stared at the floor, his pride finally too heavy to carry, and I let the silence sit. Not to punish, but to teach, because some lessons must echo before they're understood. 3 weeks after the article ran, a for sale sign appeared in front of Michael and Isabella's house. It stood tall and bold, like a verdict carved into the lawn. The photos online showed a warm, luxurious home gourmet kitchen, vaulted ceilings, landscape backyard with party lighting. Not a single caption mentioned who paid for all of it. But I didn't need credit anymore. The truth already had a name. And the house. The house now had a price. The listing agent called it a rare gem in the heart of the city. I called it what it was, a house of debt built on borrowed love. And borrowed love, like any loan, always comes due. I heard bits and pieces from neighbors and mutual friends, that Isabella's parents had pulled financial support, that Michael's LinkedIn had gone silent, that dinner invitations had dried up. Reputation was funny like that. When you polish it too hard, it cracks. Meanwhile, in my quiet little house, life was changing, but not in the way they feared. Not with drama, with peace. I planted herbs on my windowsill. I painted the hallway a soft yellow. I replaced the flickering porch light with one that worked and kept the glow warm and low like a welcome that didn't need fanfare. I even opened the old chest at the foot of my bed and pulled out Maria's photo albums. He used to label each picture, "This moment matters." And finally, I believed him. One Thursday afternoon, my great-niece Clara came by with her 2 kids. We sat in the kitchen eating orange slices and laughing about how I'd once accidentally superglued my fingers together, trying to fix a holiday decoration. "Are you really okay, Aunt Lorraine?" Clara asked. I looked at her, really looked at her and said, "I'm better than okay. For the first time in years, I'm not waiting for someone else to invite me into my own life." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're kind of famous now, you know," I chuckled. Famous fades, but freedom that lingers. And just like that, I knew. The best part of losing what you never truly had, you get to build something real from the ground up. It was a rainy Sunday morning when Michael knocked on my door again. No call ahead, no text. Just 3 soft knocks, hesitant and familiar. I opened the door slowly. He looked different this time. Not broken, but small. A man who had carried too much pride too long and finally realized how heavy it was. "Hi, Mom," he said. I didn't answer right away. I just stepped aside, letting him in. The living room smelled of lavender. A lemon pound cake cooled on the counter. A blanket was folded neatly over the couch. It was the kind of home where peace lives, and he walked into it like someone who'd forgotten what it felt like. He sat on the edge of the armchair, the same one Maria used to read in the fabric faded from years of comfort. "I don't know where to start," he said. "Try the beginning," I replied, pouring tea into 2 cups. He swallowed hard. "I messed up, Mom. I let Isabella control things. I let her speak for me, decide for me, and I let her push you away." I stirred honey into my cup. "You didn't stop her." "No," he said quietly. "I didn't. I should have stood up for you years ago. When she rolled her eyes at your food. When she changed the curtains you bought. When she asked you to stay in hotels instead of here." I looked at him. "You watched it happen." "I did," he said. "And I'm sorry." I sipped my tea. "Are you sorry it hurt me, or sorry it finally hurt you? That one landed." He blinked slowly. "Both," he said, and it was honest. Not perfect, but honest. "Mom," he said, voice low, "I don't expect you to fix anything anymore. But I'd like to try to fix something. Us." I said nothing for a long while. Just let the steam rise from my cup, the warmth settle into the room. Then I asked, "Why now?" He hesitated, "Because I finally understand that you weren't just giving money. You were giving space. Space to grow, to be, to belong. And I didn't make space for you." I nodded slowly. "You're right." And then I said what I never thought I would say, "I forgive you." His shoulders dropped, his breath catching slightly. But I continued, "Forgiveness doesn't mean we go back." He looked confused. "It means I'm not carrying anger anymore. But it also means you don't get to carry the past forward as a ticket back in." He was quiet. "It means," I said gently, "that if we're going to have a relationship, you'll have to build it. From scratch. With respect. And no more borrowed love." He nodded slowly. "Okay." And for once he didn't ask for more. He just drank his tea and sat quietly in the presence of a mother who had learned to love herself without needing to be needed. At the end of the hallway in my house, there's a small door painted over so many times it barely fits in its frame. For 8 years, I hadn't opened it. It used to be a guest room. Then it became a storage space. Then, like so many things I once loved, it became a space I ignored, walked past, forgot. But that morning something shifted. Maybe it was the way the sunlight cut across the hallway. Maybe it was the sound of Clara's laughter, still echoing from the day before. Or maybe it was time. I walked slowly, hand brushing the wall for balance, until I stood in front of the door. Then I turned the handle. Dust greeted me like a quiet handshake. The curtains hung limp. The floor creaked. The air smelled like old books and memory. Boxes were stacked high, holiday decorations, old clothes, forgotten tools. And in the corner under a faded floral sheet stood something wooden. I pulled the cloth away. It was my old writing desk, the same one Maria built for me when we first bought the house. I hadn't written at it since before the grandchildren were born. Back then I used to write poems, little essays, letters I never sent, and now here it was waiting, not judging, just patient. I spent the rest of that morning cleaning, one box at a time. I vacuumed. I opened the window. I found an old radio that still played classical music, fuzzy but warm. And by lunch, the room felt different. Lighter. Like it remembered who it used to be. Like I remembered, too. The next day, I bought a lamp. a soft yellow one with a pull chain like the ones I had in my childhood. I bought a new notebook. Not digital, not sleek, just lined paper and a leather cover, and I sat down. Not to prove anything, not to write a memoir, just to listen. To myself. The words came slowly at first. Then they came like breath. And then they came like truth. I wrote about Maria, about Michael, about Isabella. But mostly, I wrote about me. Not the mother, not the giver, not the bank account or the babysitter or the shadow in someone else's life. Me, Lorraine. A woman who once believed love meant staying silent, and now knew that love meant being seen. That room never had a name before, but now I call it mine. It was a Sunday afternoon in late March when I got the message from Rosa dinner at my place. Clara's bringing her lemon pie. The kids want to show you their science projects. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't want to go, but because for the first time in years I was being invited without expectation. Not as a babysitter, not as a bank, not as a backup plan, just Lorraine. And something inside me softened. Rosa's house was small, but full of light. Her dining table was mismatched, and her plates didn't match, but no one cared. The kids ran up to me as soon as I walked in, hugging my knees, dragging me to the kitchen to show off paper volcanoes and tin foil circuits. Clara handed me a slice of pie before I even set my purse down. Rosa poured tea, patted my hand, and said, "You've been missed." And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't said aloud yet. I wasn't lonely. I was free. After dinner, we sat on the porch with chipped mugs and wool blankets. The stars peeked out over the fence line. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked, then settled. I looked around at these people, not tied to me by blood, not owing me anything, and I felt more family than I had in years. They saw me, not what I gave, not what I owned, just me. That night back home, I walked into the room with no name, the one that was mine now, and wrote the final line in my new journal. You don't always get to choose the family you're born into, but you always get to choose the one you keep. And I chose this: a life with fewer apologies, more boundaries, more laughter, more space to be whole, and above all, a life where I finally chose myself.